had an AI create pieces for me in the styles of various classical composers, and the results are fascinating. And also a little terrifying. But most of all, hilarious. So you're going to watch as ChatGPT creates these masterpieces, these works of art right before your very eyes. And as we go along, I'll play them for you so you can hear how they sound. Now, I decided to start out with Mozart. I thought that'd be a great way to kind of get ChatGPT's feet wet in this whole concept. So I said, hey, can you just write a tuneful melody in the style of Mozart? And this is what it did. Now, it's actually not bad. It definitely feels more like Mozart than Rachmaninoff. So we're off to a decent start, I'd say. But you notice some of the weird, vague rhythms. What happens is ChatGPT actually gives me the notes and it gives me their values, but it doesn't always do a good job of squeezing it into a rhythm. It said it was in 4/4, but it wasn't exactly clear about how long should I hold each note. So honestly, I kind of had to massage this first melody quite a bit to kind of figure out where I want the beats to go. So I just said, hey, can you do this again, but keep it more in 4/4 this time? Is it possible for you to redo the melody, but just kind of try to make sure it fits in 4/4? Now, this is where things actually start to get really impressive. This might be the most impressive moment of the whole video for ChatGPT, because I said, okay, that's not bad, but really you're just kind of doing a cop-out and writing mostly quarter notes. Can you add some interesting rhythms back in, but try to keep it in 4/4? Can you give us some rhythmic interest? And I was shocked. It came up with something really good. Here's what we got. That's actually really good. Like, this is, if you're looking for the chatbot to impress you, this is the peak of the video. There'll be more things later on that won't impress you, but are way funnier. But this is actually pretty good. So I was like, wow, you're on a roll right now. Let's keep going. Can you give me some chords to add to this piece? Give me some harmony that makes sense at Mozart, but make sure it also fits with the melody. And this is what I got. Now, those of you who are already pretty well versed in classical harmony might be kind of surprised by the minor 3 chord. I definitely was. I thought about that. Then I saw it went to A minor and I was like, okay, there is a world where maybe we're in the middle of a sequence and this kind of works. But then I noticed that the A minor said it was a 2 chord. And this is just a mistake. I was like, hey, just so you know, you said E minor is 3, you're saying C is 1. So A minor, if E minor is 3, C is 1, G is 5, F is 4. What do you mean? Do you mean a 2 chord or do you mean a 6 chord? And ChatGPT said, I'm sorry. I definitely meant a D minor chord, which is in some ways makes more sense to the melody, but kind of leaves us with a wonky chord progression. Pretty good first half, and then kind of rough second half. You can almost see a world where if it added a few more chords in there at the end, you get some cool suspensions, and maybe that's what it was going for. Maybe it was kind of stuck in its mind on the 1 chord per measure, and it kind of lost its way ever since the 3 chord. The other issue was, especially in this next section here, you're going to see, it really likes root position chords, and I just don't think it has that functionality yet to understand inversions. If you know much about classical harmony, you need a lot of inversions to keep it sounding classical, so you don't end up just jumping around, making all these perfect fifths. Perfect fifths aren't necessarily a bad sound, but it sort of takes you out of the classical sound. Now, at this point, I was beginning to sense that we were almost done with Mozart. Like, despite some of the weird chords, all I really need is a good left-hand pattern to play with these chords. And we had the first few lines of a Mozart sonata done. So I just said, hey, can you give me a good left-hand pattern? And at this point, the AI went full chatbot on me. You might know someone like this in school, or you might work with someone like this who, when you ask them a question, just spouts all this information. And you're like, wow, they're so smart. I don't even deserve to be in the same room with them. They're so much smarter than me. But then you realize they might not really know much about what you're talking about. ChatGPT decided to give me paragraphs upon paragraphs and paragraphs of what a left-hand pattern is, a lot of good left-hand pattern. So I had to cut it off and say, hey, I said, give me a left-hand pattern. I want you to pick one. And so it finally decided on, unsurprisingly, Alberti based, right? It's a chatbot. It's trying to write something in the style of Mozart. So it's like Mozart equals Alberti based, which is fine. This is our final Mozart product. We have finally finished our first composer. Check it out. And then at this point, I mentioned I could put a few finishing touches on and throw some trills in there, but I was pretty happy with this Mozart. It kind of feels like Mozart, and I was itching to get on to the next composer. So I simply said, good job, good work. Now can you compose a new melody in the style of Schoenberg? Now, of course, I had to take the opportunity to sound really smart. So along with the melody, it mentioned Schoenberg is atonal. So there is no tonal center here. Now, deep down inside, I actually got really excited because I just started to throw the notes on the screen. You can see here the first several notes actually fit in the 12-tone system. I was like, really? It's going to generate a 12-tone melody for me? But then, as you just heard, it screws it up with the B and then another F, but it wrote it as E sharp. So we were kind of there. Also, it's ironic. It said there's no tonal center. It's obviously not standard practice period tonal. However, B feels real important to me. We start with that. We also get this figure. Then we end with this. That one's a resolve up to B. B minor chord at the end. So it does feel very B minor to me, but overall, I was pretty impressed with it sounding so different than the Mozart. But I couldn't stop there. Next, I asked it to create a left-hand part and said, keep it atonal. Now, I was actually really curious, since the first 6 notes did work in a 12-tone system, if by some amazing miracle, if it wrote the other 6 notes that were missing from the 12-tone scales in the left hand, I would just been blown out of the water. That didn't happen, but let me show you what it generated. Look at that. This looks like a composition student in college trying to write something in Schoenberg style. And he's like, what do I want to do? I'm going to start on F and F sharp. Dissonance, like it did. For the first note, we have as much dissonance as possible. We wrote an F and an F sharp. I'm like, haha, now it's atonal. And then it immediately goes, which doesn't feel very atonal. But the first note is F and F sharp. So it must be atonal. Okay, let me try to read this horrible thing that I created. Forgive me if I miss saying notes. This is like a Bach 2-part invention on drugs. And once again, I love how it kind of ends in B minor. At this point, I just told the chatbot, I said, you're going to make a lot of people proud with that melody. And I have to read you the quote. I have to read you what it said after that. I'm so glad you like that. It's always a fun challenge to dive into a style like Schoenberg. I'm thrilled you like the results. Atonality can be wild, but it's so satisfying when it comes together. So at this point, I decided enough of Schoenberg. Let's move on to something that I thought would be a little easier for the chatbot, the great Beethoven. I said, hey, can you give me a melody in the style of Beethoven? This is what I got. which you might be thinking is actually pretty good, but I had to really help it out with the rhythm because the rhythm was just vague. It just kind of gave me a bunch of notes. So it does kind of work, but that's because I kind of squeezed it in and made it work. So I said, hey, stop writing like Schoenberg. I want some rhythm. And it was like, oh, you're right. Sorry. Let me give you a melody in a clear 4/4 rhythm. The chatbot always chooses 4/4, by the way. Let me give you something in a clear 4/4. And this is what I got. Now, two things. First of all, yeah, it did not stick with 4/4 like it told me it would. It flat out lied. But on top of that, it's extremely boring, right? This is an extremely boring melody, which is sometimes ChatGPT's solution for like when you correct this rhythm is just to make everything quarter notes so it can't do anything too wrong. But this is where I made a mistake. This is the moment that I broke ChatGPT. What I said was, hey, I told you I wanted a clear rhythm. I did not say make the rhythm boring. I want you to add interesting rhythms and keep it in 4/4. I wasn't really mad, but I was trying to kind of play the tough guy. I was like, look, this is not going to cut it with me. I'm not going to let you get away with just writing a bunch of quarter notes that are vague and no one really knows what beat one is. I want you to add interesting rhythms. You can't write Beethoven with all quarter notes. Give me some rhythm, but keep it in 4/4. And this is when I made a mistake. I realized it couldn't forget the influence Schoenberg had on this chat conversation. This is what I got. It's wild. It's crazy. Let me play it for you. This is what it gave me. It's like, oh, you want me to write some interesting rhythms, Ryan? Take this. I think it was kind of getting mad back at me, maybe. Now, admittedly, that's actually a pretty cool rhythm. But obviously, doesn't sound much like Beethoven. So I gave it a chance to save it with the chords. I was like, well, what chords are you going to write? Because I was really curious about, obviously, the time signature is a mess. But I'm like, what key are we even in? I mean, obviously C minor-ish, right? But how is it going to make these chords work? I'm going to play it slowly so you can appreciate the harmony it came up with. I mean, in a weird way, it's kind of brilliant. Does it sound like Beethoven? No, not at all. Not at all. But at least it's kind of fun. Apparently that sounds like Beethoven, at least when it plays to Mozart. If you ask me what composer was it trying to sound like, I'd probably say Mozart. When it did to Schoenberg, if you said what composer is trying to sound like, I'd probably guess Schoenberg or something else in that era. But with this Beethoven, if you heard and I said what composers are trying to sound like, I don't think in a million years anyone would say Beethoven. So I decided to give it one more chance. It kind of impressed me with Mozart. Schoenberg, Beethoven was super fun. It doesn't sound like Beethoven, but it's super fun. But I decided to give it one more chance. I gave it a pretty simple assignment. I said, hey, can you write a melody in the style of a Bach dance? Now, I said a Bach dance instead of a Bach fugue because I've actually tried this before where I attempted to get ChatGPT to write a good fugue and it was just atrocious. I couldn't do it. So I was like, let's give it a simpler assignment. Let's just try to generate only the melody of a dance. And guys, it did a great job. This is what it came up with. This sounds pretty good. I mean, it's obviously a little too pentatonic sounding at times for Bach, and the ending's kind of weird. But just imagine the last few notes were changed to this. this is actually pretty good. I was thinking this is why I was most impressed by its first attempt at Bach was really good. I was like, wow, ChatGPT has shown it can write classical music. I only had one small complaint, a very small complaint. It said in the text, I'm writing a jig. Now that's fine. But not only did it say I'm writing a jig, for the first time in the entire conversation, it told me I'm composing this in 6/8. For every other piece, it said 4/4. It has gone out of its way to say this is in 4/4. But this was the first time it said I'm writing in 6/8. So I was like, hey, I told it I was impressed. I mean, you did a great job. This really does kind of feel like a Bach dance. My only small complaint is you wrote this in 4/4. And you said 6/8. I don't mind that much. So either say it's in 4/4 or maybe switch it around for 6/8. Now 6/8 does make more sense for a jig, but I was like, I'll give it that if it wants to say it's a jig in 4/4, but you should at least kind of match. ChatGPT went on to say, oh, I see what you're confused about. I didn't do a good job of emphasizing the triplet feel. So you, Ryan, probably got confused because I didn't emphasize the triplet feel. You probably thought it was a 4/4. I have reworked the melody to emphasize the triplet feel so that it is clearly in 6/8. And this is what I got. Which is awesome. It literally wrote every single measure in 5/8, which is great. A 3 + 2 5/8 feel the entire time. I mean, you could add in the left-hand pattern and make this sound awesome, like a. I mean, that sounds awesome. Nothing like Bach. It sounds nothing like Bach, but this is the coolest thing I came up with all day. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of video. I've never tried a video quite like this before, so if this is something you enjoy, for sure let me know in the comments if you want more, and maybe even request a composer you'd like to see me try in the future. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit. See you guys in the next video.